Hello and welcome everybody to the second Restore UK Live. And tonight we've got a very good show lined up for you. We've got people from right around the United Kingdom. They're here to talk about what's happening right across the United Kingdom. They're here to speak about their area, and they're here to really tell us that outside of our own respective goldfish bowls, although that we live in the United Kingdom, our problems are literally the same, and we're all being hit by exactly the same things. So what I would like to do right now is I'd like to ask everybody that's on the screen to please share this broadcast far and wide, because it is you people that will make this happen. It is you people that can help us push this out to as many people as humanly possible. And if we create numbers, what we can do is that we can change a lot of things within the United Kingdom. So what I would like to do this evening is just to explain what it is that Restore is and what it is that we hope to do within Restore. It's not just myself on the screen, or not just the people that will be coming on the screen, but it's all about people. It's all about working for the collective benefit of people right around the United Kingdom. I mean, today in 2020, what we're being hit left, right, and centre, and that's literally by people that are wanting to remove our Britishness, that are wanting to remove ourselves as part of the United Kingdom, and are wanting to destroy our nationality. Well, do you know what? You see, if enough people stand together, that can happen. That won't happen. And the only thing that politicians understand, and that's no matter where those politicians are from, that's whether the politicians are from Wales, from Scotland, from England, or from Northern Ireland. I mean, respectively, those politicians need to get votes at the time of election. And, you know, if we can show that we have enough people behind us, and if we can influence enough people, well, you know something, we can say to those politicians, well, if you want to sign up to what is beneficial to the United Kingdom, if you want to fight meaningfully and proactively for the United Kingdom to maintain every single constituent part of the United Kingdom, and if you want to change your ways to work for the people as opposed to seeking and getting a vote and then dispensing with people as if they don't matter, well, if politicians want to do that, well then, you know, they would be welcome to the vote. So this is what Restore is all about. It's about restoring common sense. It's about restoring the power back to the people. And it's about restoring the United Kingdom to a place, a safe, a secure, and a prosperous place in where each and every one of us can live. So without any further ado, what I would like to do is that I'll just bring in the guests one by one. And I would like the guests to give a brief description of who they are, where they're from, what it is that's dear to their heart, and just really explain a bit about you to the people on the screen. So first and foremost, I would like to bring in a man from Wales, a man that I've spoken to before, and a man that I know that you're going to enjoy as Potter. And, you know, I'm going to ask him here for a quote from Margaret Thatcher, because I remember the last time he was on the screen is that we had a great quote, and it's a quote that I've used consistently ever since this man had used it. So without any further ado, I would like to bring in Richard Taylor.
Well, good evening, John. Thanks for having me on the Restore the show tonight. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah,
and just viewers to know, I'm obviously passionate Welshman, as you could tell by my vocals, and I'm the host of Rich Politics, a show I run on a weekly basis, a non-politically correct weekly broadcast where we have guests on. We talk about all things politics here in Wales and, of course, around the United Kingdom. And I'm a passionate unionist. I'm Welsh and I'm British, and I'm proud of it. And the quote I think you refer to, which is strange for a man from Wales to quote a Margaret Thatcher quote, of all people, after what she did during the shutting down of the mines, shall we say, and people haven't forgiven her, but people are waking up. And it's this, that, you know, to beat socialism, the socialists say we get up early every morning to campaign for our cause. And she said, we've got to make sure we get up a lot earlier. And she is right. You know, we got to fight this socialist woke left agenda, because let's be honest, it's destroying our country and it's having devastating effect on our communities.
Yeah, Richard, and you know, I mean, people in Wales do have their gripes with Margaret Thatcher, but we'll tell you what, we'll take that quote, we'll keep it, we'll bag it, and we'll subscribe totally to that quote. And you know, here in Northern Ireland, I mean, look what Margaret Thatcher done to us. Margaret Thatcher in 1985, in November 1985, she signed the Anglo-Irish Agreement, which really put in place in its embryonic form the giving away of Northern Ireland. You know, I mean, I've often said to our politicians that, are we Hong Kong in waiting? Well, I believe that we are. And I believe that if these politicians are left to their own devices, incrementally, we will be handed over to Ireland, which really, what will it do? Well, I'm saying Ireland, let's not make any mistake, will be handed over to the vassal state of the EU, because Ireland doesn't have any power or authority over Ireland anymore, and that's just as simple as that. But look, that's what Margaret Thatcher done. But here,
but she also said this. She said, well, socialism, you know, socialism is spending other people's money, and it's okay until you run out of money, and then you need to find that money, and that's where obviously capitalism is a whole new story. But maybe for another day, John, another day.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a quote which is you know, it's ripe for today, let's just say. So moving on to our next guest, again, this is a patriot from Scotland. He's a man who that I watch his live feeds at 1 o'clock every Saturday, and I've watched some of his videos, and I have to say, in terms of people that stands up for Scotland, I don't think that there's another man in Scotland. I mean, this is a modern day William Wallace. Here he is. I know that he's not fighting for Scottish independence. He's certainly standing up for the people of Scotland in a way that you know, that William Wallace character would have. I mean, he means the best for the people of Scotland. And because this man subscribes to Britishness, and because he subscribes to the United Kingdom, it doesn't mean to say that he's not a Scottish man, because he totally is. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce on our screens tonight Alistair McConaughey. And Alistair, whenever you come in, if you'd just like to tell the people a wee bit about you, what it is that you do, and what it is that you patriotically are proud to stand up for in the way that you do, fearlessly. And, you know, and I believe that you'll continue to do that until there's not another breath left in your body. So I'd like everybody to welcome on the screen Alistair McConaughey.
Oh, thank you very much, John, for that welcome. I'm not going to be riding about on a horse shouting freedom like Mel Gibson used to do. But I do think a lot of people in Scotland want freedom from the Scottish nationalists, the Scottish separatists, which totally dominate the political and media system up here in Scotland, and have done for a long time, at least overtly now, since they took over Holyrood back in 2007, but even to an extent before then. So yeah, I'm the founder and director of A Force for Good, which is a pro-UK campaigning group and think tank. And we've been established now for coming on for 9 years. We started in 2012, and we've grown to the point where we are today a registered company. We have directors, and this is my full-time job, campaigning to keep the United Kingdom together. And around me, I've built a very good team of video editors and social media people, as well as many people who come out and stand with us on the streets when the Scottish nationalists have their marches, because we have to be out there, and we have to show the rest of the country, not just Scotland, but all of the United Kingdom, that the Scottish nationalists don't have it all their way. They're not the only people. There are strong unionists in Scotland who love the United Kingdom, who love being British, and who want to keep us together. So we're always out on the streets. We call ourselves the Thin Red Line, because there's always fewer of us than there are of the Scottish nationalists at their marches. But just like the Thin Red Line of Highlanders at the Battle of Balaclava, we will prevail ultimately. Yeah. And we're not going to stop doing that. And of course, we also count the marchers, because the marchers pretend deliberately that there's many, many, many more of them than there actually is. In fact, ridiculously, last year they had a march in Edinburgh where the SNP itself claimed there was 250,000. Well, we videoed them from one or two vantage points, and we took several hours to actually count the individual marchers, and it was less than 12,000. So we are being lied to as well by the nationalist movement, and the media, the mass media, don't at the moment show much interest in trying to dig down and find the truth. So it's up to people like ourselves and all those who support us to really be the physical opposition, the sign of physical peaceful opposition, to literally fly the flag for the United Kingdom. Because if we didn't do it, there's no other group at the moment who would be doing it from our non-party political point of view. So, as you mentioned as well, this year's there hasn't been marches. There was one big march in Glasgow back in January, and they said there was 80,000 on that, but we counted it and they came in at about 10,000. So we've been doing other things this year. We've been standing up for the statues as well. We've been defending Henry Dundassy's statue in St Andrew's Square in Edinburgh. We've been standing up for the statues here in George Square, successfully so with others. And we've been running what we call our Saturday Street Stall, which is our broadcast every Saturday at 1 o'clock for an hour as well online. So we've been keeping our profile high even during this crazy time of lockdown and the COVID problems that we've been facing.
Yeah, you just said something that was very interesting there, Alistair, and I would like to ask you. I mean, you talked about the other side, the socialists, the so-called liberals and the left, how that they inflate numbers and what it is that they do in order to inflate those numbers. I mean, I've looked at this for a very, very long time. Here in Northern Ireland, we constantly challenge the narrative that comes from the mainstream media, and it is that very mainstream media. I mean, I would say to some people that if you look at that television, it is a tell lie vision, and that's what it does. It constantly tells you lies, and I'm assuming that that's what you were referring to. Would you just like to tell us the mechanism by which they would have used to inflate those numbers on the march, and why is it that they do that? I mean, do they do that to try to create people, think that the people on our side of the fence, the unionists, the Scottish people who believe in Britishness, is it to demoralise them? Is it to make them think that, that they're smaller in numbers? Well, I would like to say that British unionists here all right around the United Kingdom, I mean, we are the silent majority. Ourselves, our conservatism, people with conservative voices, and people that are live and let live type people, they just don't want to cause any people any harm. And, could you just tell us about what mechanisms did they use in Scotland to inflate those numbers, and why did they do it, Alistair?
Well, you used the word that disheartened, which was exactly the word I was going to use, or demoralise. So to demoralise and dishearten unionists who, unless they get told by people like us, won't know any better. For example, if you see a march that takes an hour and a half to pass, most people, virtually everybody, doesn't really know what that could be, what numbers those could be. It could be anything from 7,000 to 100,000 in their head. So people don't know what those kind of numbers will be unless you actually count them specifically. So it's very easy for the nationalists to finish the march and say, okay, think of a number, double it, let's say 100,000. And they'll just immediately put out a tweet, and the Scottish media will just pick it up and say 100,000 on the march. Whereas what should happen is that the BBC or STV or the newspapers should have their own journalists and reporters there making a proper count, so that they have the correct figures, and they can. But the Scottish media, like media everywhere, is running short of journalists and people on the ground. And so they're just going to take the easy way. And if they get told it's 100,000, they'll just put in 100,000. Sounds a lot sexier than saying 7,500.
I think as well, what Alistair's saying there is very important, because we talk about the media and the narrative that they push out to the members of the public. We have a problem here, and I'm sure Scotland has as well, with nationalists as well, that a lot of our media is very dominated by Welsh independence. Certainly for us, that they're Scottish independence. They seem very keen to promote anything. We have a thing called Wales Online. We've got this movement called Yes Cymru, and these are organisations that are public, some of them publicly funded, by the way, Nation Cymru, by taxpayers' money, and they seem to be given a voice much louder than anybody else. Any opposing ideas to saving the union, keeping us together strong, they seem intent that they want more devolved powers. So they want the media itself devolved as well. And so we have within our media many of the people at the top end of it. Some of them producers, editors, executive producers. They are former Welsh Independence Party members. Some of them are still members. So obviously coming through the airwaves, coming through our TV screens, we're being told constantly there's this strong growing sense of Welsh independence. Same in Scotland. I've seen it with your media as well. There is a strong, but actually the numbers, as Alistair's pointed out, they don't really add up. What this is a tactic that they're using to promote a narrative that actually works against what we stand for, is one United Kingdom and keeping our union together, because together we're stronger.
Well said.
Here, Richard. Moving on to our next guest. There's 4 of us on the screen tonight, and I have to say that if I had a thought about it, I really should have went the whole way and brought a man from England on. So, Jack Ross, if you're around, give us a shout. We'll send you a link and we can bring you on. So, to another man that I know this man. I've known him for a number of years now, and I've become, I have to say, intrigued with some of the things, some of his knowledge on the way that he writes. This man has written several books. He works tirelessly for his community. He's a very well-respected man within his community, and he has a linkage to Scotland, Alistair. It's a man called Gary Blair, and he's also a keen interest in Ulster Scots and the linkage between Scotland and really the north coast of Northern Ireland. And over the years, that if I ever want to know anything about Ulster Scots, well, I would call upon this man, because this man will give me all the detail that I need to know. I personally speaking, I have a great affinity with people from Scotland, England, and Wales. But I would have never ever have called myself an Ulster Scot until this man that's about to come on, until he pointed out to me that I use a lot of words that actually are Ulster Scots. So without any further ado, I would like to bring in a man, as I say, a man who works tirelessly for his own community, and a man that I know, just like everyone on the screen, that in his heart is the United Kingdom and the continuation thereof. And this is a man that whilst there's breath left in his body, if he's anything to do with it, well, the United Kingdom, it'll continue to be in existence. So without any further ado, I would like to bring in Gary Blair, and I'd like everybody to welcome Gary Blair. So Gary, if you'd just like to tell people a bit about you, a bit about your Ulster Scots links, and also a bit about the book that you've recently written. I know that you've written several books, and we'll bring you on to speak about those several books in the near future, but we're focusing on one which really unites us all. You see, our veterans, the people that went to put themselves up for really standing between ourselves and aggression from other nations. Our veterans, our soldiers, our national service heroes. Well, Gary has recently written a book about a man in Ballymoney. I'm not going to steal Gary's thunder. About a 14-year-old who went to join the British Army, that went to offer himself to stand up for his community in order that his community wouldn't be unfairly treated by the aggression that was happening in and around the turn of the century. So without any further ado, I'd like to bring in Gary Blair, and if you'd just like to tell us a bit about yourself, Gary.
Thank you very much, John, and good evening, everybody. I have a great interest in the Ulster Scots language, not just the language, but also the culture. You'll probably hear before much longer when I speak that there's a Scots dimension to how we talk in this part of Northern Ireland, and especially in this part of County Antrim. The Ulster Scots language, the Ulster Scots culture is a much misrepresented language and culture, and it's misunderstood as a result of that misrepresentation. I had never lived in Scotland. I had never been in it any longer than a week. Yet, if I go on holiday in Europe, anywhere at all, people never ask what part of Ireland are you from, they automatically would say, oh, well, what part of Scotland are you from? So I just say, well, you just go up to Glasgow and basically turn left and keep going over water, and I'm somewhere there. So I'm balanced. So Ulster Scots really came into itself about 1998, whenever for the first time there was a legal recognition of the language and the attendant culture. Up until then, I think the people didn't realise themselves they were Scots. If you'd asked me what language I spoke when I was young, or my forefathers, my parents, my grandparents, we all would have said English, because in our age that's what we spoke, and everybody in our area spoke the same way. But there's a very distinctive and historical reason for a very distinctive Scots slant on how we speak. You can go back generations, you can go back centuries, you can go right back to the days of King Fergus Mór MacCurrach, who left in Suffolk in 501 AD and moved to Scotland and set up his kingdom in Dalriada at Donad. There were two parts to Dalriada, something that people didn't really know. That's been written out of history, but there it is. That King Fergus Mór was based in Dalriada and Suffolk and the Northumbrian coast. His kingdom spanned two land masses, and that's the west of what's now known as Scotland and the northeast of what's now known as Northern Ireland. When he moved because of trouble, imagine trouble in Ulster, hard to credit, eh? But in 500 AD, he moved on. He moved across to Donad, and for that, you had Kenneth MacAlpine, the first king of Scotia Minor, and I went on down the line, and I'm not trying to claim that we formed Scotland, I mean, but that link has been there, that historic link, and that geographical nearness between the east coast of Ireland and the western coast of Scotland in particular, where a lot of people migrated as they moved over the centuries, backwards and forwards to the times of the Great Plantation of King James, preceded by a number of smaller plantations, like, for example, when the Randall MacDonald plantation, when the Lord of the Isles was settled in Northumberland, where I'm from, where you had 300 Scottish families brought over and dispersed through it, an area known as the Rutland Glens, which is basically Northumberland and eastern coast of Glens. Then in the following year, you had the Hamilton and Montgomery settlement and Clanton down, where two Scottish entrepreneurs, Hamilton and Montgomery, and I believe Hamilton came with Dunlop. It was actually his father's crypt, and they came across and they set up great estates, and they brought over Scottish workers, and they populated most of north and east down, and that time Northumberland was populated, and then you had the plantation itself, the great plantation that took care of all the other counties, where the Scots came in great numbers, and the Northern English too, but mainly Scots, and mainly Lowland Scots, and throughout the periods of history, and if anybody familiar with Scottish history will know that the Killing times, a lot of people came across here. There were Covenanters. Where I live, there's a great number of Covenanter churches right across, scattered through Northumberland, which is testimony to their presence. So it's undeniable that there's an Ulster Scots link. That the link between Ulster and Scotland, as far as the mainland goes, is probably the strongest. A lot because of history, but also because, as I say, of geographical nearness, where you're only talking about at 1.13 miles to Torhead, the Northumberland coast, to the Mull Kintyre, and less than 20, only in the teens of miles between North Down and Port Patrick. The Scots' influence on how we talk has changed greatly over the years, because my grandparents spoke a broad Scots, or braid Scots. All the people in our area spoke that, not for any other reason other than that is how they learned to speak, and they passed it on to their next generation. What happened to the Scots language in Ulster, or Ulster Scots, is that the Education Act came in, which was good, and that people learned to read and write in school was mandatory, but English was held up as the standard, and English was held up as the norm. So people were dissuaded, myself included, from speaking in this broad Scots. Instead of saying down the tune, which is natural, we had to then start saying down the town, and we had to read that and we had to write it. It's very much misunderstood, I think, even by Unionists, Ulster Scots. They see it as some type of third way, as a square peg in a round hole. And what we're going to do with that, Ulster Scots, now that it's here? We've been here always. It's just that we get legal recognition, unofficial recognition, only in the last couple of decades. So my day job is to promote that tongue, that language, and also that culture. But it's also something I've been interested in all my life anyway. The wee book that I wrote that John referred to came about as a result of my interest in a photograph. And Nathan Marner, that my granny's brother, the only brother she had, certainly the only brother that made it to adulthood. And he was only a kid when the First World War broke out. And as John says, he disappeared. We knew very little about this fella, even my granny did. She was 4 years his junior. So in 1915, she was 10, 14. But he ran off to join up, and he joined the Royal Irish Rifles. They, as was common at the time, we were working people. They had a fear of writing. They possibly, my great-grandfather couldn't write at all or read, so they went to the one person in the area who did, and that was a clergyman, the Reverend Craig, who wrote a letter to the War Office and explained that this kid was only in his mid-teens and he needed to be sent back, which he was. He was sent back, and he got, the only way they could send him back was because he had lied about his age, obviously, to join up. They gave him a dishonourable discharge, but he was only back for a lot of months when he disappeared again. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole content of the book, because obviously then you'll not buy it. Only joking.
Yeah.
But whenever he went away the second time, this time he did it different. And this only goes to show that the one place where he felt at home, the one place where he felt comfortable, this young fella from a very rural area and a very isolated house, he went to Lanarkshire, to North Lanarkshire. Whenever he was only a child, of course, back then you left school at 11 or 12, and his brother-in-law had taken him as an apprentice at the outbreak of the war, just before the war started. Knowing the war was coming, a lot of young Scots from that area joined up, and of course you had Hamilton nearby, which was a great recruiting area for the army, and they went over to, they actually went to Bells Hill, the mines. They were joiners, they were joiners, and they were making the shutter in the mines. They were making mine shafts. So this young fellow went as an apprentice. So outside his own wee tiny parish, his own wee cluster of houses, the only place he knew in the world was North Lanarkshire. So what we never knew was that he went across there and he joined up there. He lived there. Now, we never found any of this out. We found out he died. A neighbour came, I think, a year after the war ended, around 1919, and told his parents. This neighbour said that he'd been talking to somebody from a different town who had mentioned seeing this young fella in the hospital, and he'd heard that he died. But they get no official notification. They get no telegram for the War Office. Their son just disappeared that second time, and they never heard from him again. He existed only in the memories of his sisters, who are now long dead, and a photograph that stared down at us all because copies were made with this unknown soldier. Well, I didn't believe there should be an unsung hero. I didn't believe there should be unknown soldiers. So I wrote this book, 18 Summers, because that's how long I lived, for 18 summers only. And it tells about the short but very eventful life of William Hanna. But it's not just his story. I believe that's the story of thousands and thousands of young people who at that time answered the call. And this book is a tribute to them all. But also, I found out a lot about William Hanna. I found out a lot about his time in Scotland, in and around Bells Hill, Moss End, and all that area. And it's all in the book. And it was a labour of love. I got to say that I got a lot for Scotland's people. They were brilliant, and the census records and so on. But it tells a story that was probably common in thousands of households, not just here in Northern Ireland, but in Scotland and Wales and across the UK. Revisionists would tell you that young people such as William Hunter had no knowledge of what war was like, and they went for the adventure. And I never denied that in my book. There's a certain amount of that probably to escape poverty back in the early part of the 20th century. But they were a politically aware family, if not a politically active family, because I found that his father signed the Ulster Covenant in 1912. And where he signed it at was about probably on a round trip walking, probably about 20 miles. So when you are prepared to walk 20 miles to sign a piece of paper to pledge your loyalty to the United Kingdom, then you're someday, or you're the head of a household that is at least politically aware. And bear in mind, a lot of these young people fought the First World War to secure their place within the United Kingdom. In 1912, the Home Rule Bill had become law. In 1914, it was shelved. Home Rule was basically one parliament based in Dublin, where the whole of Ireland would have representation, and MPs would no longer be sent to Westminster. It was de facto independence, and it was, the king was certainly head of state, but that was it. There was a great big governor general. So these young people went and answered the call to prove their mettle and to prove their loyalty and to prove that they were worthy of being set apart from this breakup of the UK, that they wanted to remain part of it. And that was one of the main reasons why so many answered the call and fought. So the book is 18 summers. That's how many summers he saw. He was born in 1900. He was dead in October 1918. And it's a tribute to all the family of nations within Britain who gave up their sons for a greater good and for a greater freedom.
Yeah, that's definite. And here at Restore, veterans are very, very dear to our hearts. And that's not no matter what which theatre that the veterans fought in, because let's not put any, they went to stand up for the United Kingdom, for the people of the United Kingdom. And as I said before, in order to ensure that the United Kingdom would be a safe, a secure and a prosperous place for each and every one of us to live. And isn't it unbelievable how that the freedoms that those people would have fought to maintain today in 2020, those freedoms are under threat today. With Reverend William Hanna, and then we'll move around the screen and we'll just ask each and every one to give us their take on veterans and tell us all about what veterans means to those people and what our armed forces mean to those people. But William Hanna, just there last year, I dedicated a plaque to William Hanna in Ballymoney, County Antrim. And, we done this as part of an outreach called Street for a Hero, where what we wanted to do was we wanted to identify heroes right around the United Kingdom. Every street, every town, every city right around the United Kingdom has those heroes. That's where the streets that the heroes came from. We were seeking to rename some of those streets after people like William Hanna, people who would have gave their lives in order to stand up for the United Kingdom. And what a worthy cause that would be to dedicate and rename streets in their honour. And, when I think about this, our British government, the Westminster government, even in the Scottish Parliament, even in the Welsh Assembly today, in the Northern Ireland Assembly, just think of this. This is big. Why is it that those people would oppose that we would rename our streets after our heroes? Because our heroes stood up for everyone, not just ourselves, but they provided the freedoms that these people, these enemies of the United Kingdom that are living amongst us, they provided the freedoms that they enjoy too, the freedoms that they enjoy in order to stand up against us. May I add? So, Richard, no doubt that in Wales, you have a great affinity with the people from Wales who also, and the people right around the United Kingdom who went and stood up in order to ensure that the rest of the United Kingdom could remain safe, secure, and prosperous. Could you just tell us a bit about that, please, Richard?
Yeah, I think, well, to be quite frank, I think one of the things that concerns me the most in these times that we live in. Can you hear me all right? Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
I just want to check you can hear me, sorry, because I've lost my volume here. Is the fact that veterans are forgotten. We see people are given certain precedence over our veterans. So, for example, if you are an asylum seeker and you come here to Wales, which has declared itself as a nation of sanctuary by Plaid Cymru, we will take care of you. We'll give you top-notch accommodation. We will look after you and everything else with all the benefits that come with that. But yet there are veterans sleeping homeless on our streets. And this is 2020. This is not acceptable. It is completely, it's abhorrent, and it should never, never happen. These men and women are heroes. They served to give us the freedoms that we have today. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be who we are or where we are. And I have 5 children, and I've always brought my kids up in a way that I taught them to honor the past and be thankful for those who served to give them the freedoms that they have. And when we had the Remembrance Sunday, gone now obviously in November, when we remembered those who had fallen in all the wars past and those who served in present wars currently as well, it was a few months before that we were seeing these huge crowds of protests and marches for all kinds of organizations such as Black Lives Matter and many other groups that were allowed to continue to go on our streets even in the middle of a pandemic. And yet, to honor the veterans and at the cenotaph, these war heroes, men and women, weren't allowed to take to the streets to pay their respects and to pay tribute to those who had fallen. I find that absolutely abhorrent, and the government should be ashamed of themselves. They should have allowed it to happen. I know people will argue and say, well, Rich, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Well, why did you allow the other protests to take place? This wasn't a protest. This was honoring a generation that had sacrificed their lives so that we could have our tomorrow. And I'm here in Wales, I'm more concerned over the fact that the political landscape towards veterans, and I think especially in our schools, because we have a socialist left woke agenda being promoted in our schools that is trying to take away our history, and almost to the point where we're treating our veterans as if they were war criminals. No, these were men and women that gave their lives for our country, and somebody needs to stand up for them. And I will stand up for them, as you can tell, as a passionate Welshman. And I think we need to make sure that we never forget what it cost them to give us the freedoms that we have. And the famous words, lest we forget, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Alistair, I was introduced to a man there a few months ago, and he was from the South Coast area, and he's done a lot of work in terms of collating the names of veterans in that area, and also he's done some work up around Coat Bridge. Could you tell us about what it is, what your affinity with veterans and veterans issues in Scotland, Alistair?
Absolutely. One of the things about being British and our British history is the number of wars basically that Britain has been involved in going right back, and a very interesting history, of course, with the Empire and so on. And when we speak about veterans or ex-servicemen and women, we're not just talking about the ones in our lifetime and in our generation. We're going really right back. And the further you go back, the more you realize that the people who hate the United Kingdom really have it in for those elements of our history and for these soldiers and leaders of that time. And we've seen with the Black Lives Matter movement and the various spin-offs around that, people like Nelson, for example, are being attacked. And not just these famous leaders, but also the poor bloody infantry as well. And I'll give you an example. On Edinburgh Esplanade, there is a monument called the India Cross. And there's a plaque on the railings next to it, which explains what it's about. And the plaque is actually a very good plaque. And it speaks about the heroes of Lucknow, which were the 78th Highlanders who defended Lucknow back in the mid-19th century. Now, somebody took exception to the word heroes on that plaque, and they complained to Historic Environment Scotland, who run Edinburgh Castle. And Historic Environment Scotland said, you're right, we're going to remove that plaque because it shouldn't have the word heroes in there. Now, that was one person. Now, Rob from Save Our Statues, and I'm interested to hear that Richard is in touch with him, Rob set up a petition to keep the plaque, basically, to keep the description of heroes. And last time I looked, it had over 2,000 signatories. But it really shocked me that Quango, such as Historic Environment Scotland, which is very powerful, was able to basically befoul the memory of our servicemen back then and say that they weren't heroes. You know, that's a real assault basically on our history. So it's not just about the men and women who have been killed recently and within living memory. I mean, it's going right back. It's going right back 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago. Anything to do with the United Kingdom, the enemies of Britain will attack it and try to pull it down. And so we've always got to be alert to that. And when they try to pull something down, we have to put something back up again. And I liked your idea there about naming streets, perhaps, over significant individuals or just people who had been killed during the wars going right back. But to answer your question, the British armed forces are very central to the idea of Britishness in many ways. And when you run down the British armed forces, you're running down Britishness. And when you physically deplete the British armed forces, you're also running down Britishness, because when I was growing up back in the 70s, we had lots of Scottish regiments still around. You know, my local one was the Royal Highland Fusiliers, I believe, in Ayr. And now all of these have just been abolished, and we've got one Royal Regiment of Scotland, which is a great regiment and it's better than nothing. But we've lost all these local connections, which also helped to create a sense of Britishness among all the young men who joined them. And so that's also a problem when we're trying to hold the United Kingdom together, is where are the institutions that we used to have? Are they still extant? Are they still strong? Or have they been run down? And very often they've been run down, such as the British Army, by the British government, whose primary aim should be to figure out ways to keep the United Kingdom together and to build up Britishness. And as I say, the British Armed Forces is certainly one way that Britishness as a concept is spread throughout the four corners of the United Kingdom.
John, can I just pick up on
Yes, go ahead, Richard.
Something Alistair said is very interesting. When we talked about Save Our Statues, which I'm a great supporter of, by the way, and the guys that, you know, are involved in that campaign. Just last week, the Welsh government had commissioned an inquiry into street names and statues in Wales. And they published a report on their findings, and it came out this week, actually. And it's interesting to note in there that they've scored. It's like a score chart, basically, of each statue or street name and what relationship they had with slave trade, or whether they, you know, were involved in it, or in a way that was direct or indirect, and looking for something that really truly isn't there. And they're talking about changing street names, changing, you know, getting rid of that. Thomas Picton in Cardiff City Hall has been covered up. He's been boxed in. I know that Neil Hamilton, you know, the leader of UKIP, has been quite an advocate for standing up. I think he's in Carmarthenshire. There's another statue of Thomas Picton there. And he's been defending it because the people in Carmarthenshire in Wales don't want it removed. And I think what we have to realize here, that when you attack a nation's history, there is something bigger at play than we realize. Because to eradicate a nation's history, to take it away, it doesn't validate that everything we did in the past was right. We made mistakes. What country in the world has never made mistakes? Let's be honest, we all have. We've all been involved in past wars and conflicts we should never have got involved in. Ask Tony Blair, he knows all about that. Anyway, another time. But the truth is, these are what I call cultural terrorists that want to destroy our history. So the point, this is the point. So we have no point of reference to teach our children where we've come from. So we can create a new future, a new norm that excludes our journey and our history and our Britishness. So they can play a narrative of wokeness, leftness, and socialism into the fabric of our society and our DNA. That is what's happening right now. And people across the United Kingdom need to wake up, because it's a reality. And we have to, as the guys at Save Our Statues are standing up, and I know us on Restore are as well, it's something we need to fight for, to keep our unit together, to look back at our past and our history and realize that there are lessons that we've learned, but it's something we should be proud of. We should be a proud country, a proud nation. I certainly am, and I never go back on that.
Yeah, Gary, and I'm just going to ask you the same question here, and it's to do with the veterans and what veterans mean to you. Why are veterans dear to your heart? And last year, myself, yourself, and a lot of our friends, whilst that we were naming that or dedicating that plaque to the honour of William Hanna. We also took part in a march for veterans who were associated with Operation Banner. And as I say, there was a good turnout that day in Ballymoney, County Antrim. And just over to you, and if you could just tell us a little bit about what it is that veterans mean to you, Gary.
Well, veterans mean everything to me, and I think they should be remembered. I think they should be remembered and respected, and that their memory should be respected, but not just the dead. There are plenty of veterans alive and well, and plenty of people from the community I come from who joined up and served their country and were active in service right through the Gulf Wars, right back as far as the Falklands. People I know who fought in those wars, and they risked their lives, and it really gets to me and it winds me up whenever I see this purge on veterans and how patriotism generally has now become an embarrassment. And if you're a patriot, you're by extension some type of racist, which couldn't be further from the truth. I think that the fact that in this country, it's a hot potato, and the British Army was always a hate figure for a section of this community, but that same section of the community are naming their offices and their parks and different buildings after people, IRA men who were killed and IRA women who were killed in active service, as they describe it, and they see the problem with that, and it's the hypocrisy of that really grates me, that they can do that they can be immortalised on buildings and statues and plaques and so forth, yet veterans of the army should be maligned and should be defamed and should be a source of great contempt and embarrassment even. We owe our existence, we owe all that we have to the veterans of the different wars. But it's become a political football here, like everything else. It's very easy then to sweeping contempt for all veterans, and there's no place for them, and they should feel ashamed of themselves for ever having served. I think that's a terrible situation, and I think that's something that should be addressed. We did have a very successful parade that day in support of the soldiers who've been persecuted for being part of Operation Banner, and that's the word. They're being witch hunted and they're being persecuted. There's a lot more time and effort has been given into bringing them to the courts than the thousands, literally, of unsolved murders in this country, which we didn't even mention. So I think put in context, the veterans should be remembered and should be respected. And whenever they leave service, I think they should be taken care of better. We're hearing horror stories of poverty, homelessness, and all sorts of things facing. And there's probably PSTD, and there's probably a lot of that goes on, and it's been ignored, and it's been made here too. The central government are letting these people down terribly. And they have no recourse and they no redress. And whenever people had to take to the streets, and parade and march, they try and highlight the plight of them because the politicians and because Westminster abandoned them. I think that's a very indicting.
Yeah, so we're not really going to leave the veterans issue before that we mention the persecution and prosecution of the veterans who served in Operation Banner here in Northern Ireland. And I often say that at a time whenever IRA terrorists have immunity from prosecution And make no mistake about it, those people have immunity from prosecution. Whilst they have immunity from prosecution, our veterans are being taken from their beds in their old age, sometimes for things that happened over 40 years ago. And often they've already been tried for these things, and they're being taken out and they're being retried again. And we call it the witch hunt. And, you know, it really, really beggars belief that the law enforcers are being painted as the bad guys, and that the terrorists are being painted as the good guys. So back to what I'm going to move on to next, and we're going to be talking about the foundations of the United Kingdom, and how that if our foundations are undermined, well, you know, how can we stand as a people if we're being constantly undermined? And, you know, I blame our politicians for permitting this to happen. So I'm going to move on to just actually put a picture up on our screen here, and I'm going to ask each and every individual on the screen to really look at what it says on this quote. Now, whenever I pop the picture up, I'll read it, it'll give a bit of context, and then we'll move around the screen and I'll ask each and every one for a comment on this picture. And it's with reference foundations, because let's face it, the British Army protected the foundations. They protected the foundations for, you know, for throughout time. And all of a sudden, the people that protected the foundations are the ones that are under attack. And, you know, that leaves the foundations open to attack. So I'd just like to pop this picture on the screen. We'll give a bit of context, and then I'll ask some questions moving around the screen. So, sorry, I just need to get rid of something here. Please accept my apologies here. Right, okay, so if the foundation be destroyed, what can we do? Now, that's actually a quote from the Christian Bible. If the foundation be destroyed, and there's a slight few words different at the very end of it, which says, what can we do? What can we do as a people? So I'm just going to pop this back down again, and I'm going to ask yourself, Richard, to what can we do to stop our foundations from being eroded, from being attacked, from being dismantled, and from stopping the United Kingdom from falling apart, Richard?
Well, I think the answer to the question is we've got to fight against division. You know, we've got very divisive politics going on. We've got people trying to, as we've already talked about, erase our history or to try to reshape our history, to tell it in a different way. We've got politicians who seem intent on small government, but then small government leads to devolved administrations, which means separation, and separatists and nationalists who believe their best interest is served apart from the United Kingdom on their own. And, you know, I know certainly from Alistair's point of view with the Scottish National Party, I should say, with the Nationalist Party, certainly they're in Scotland. They're a little bit further down the road when it comes to fighting for independence. But that independence, it goes back to my answer to the question, is around the word division. They want to divide us. That is the intent, that is the purpose, because a house divided against itself cannot stand. That is the reality of the situation. And so what we're seeing is people who are intent on dividing us up, saying we're better than them. Look at the way the pandemic's been handled right now. Each devolved administration saying they've handled it better than the other. You know, London's done this, we've done that. Scotland's better than England, England's better than Wales. Wales is better. It's a load of absolute baloney. We should have had one United Kingdom approach to all of this. It would have saved the confusion, the economic mess we're in, the fact that the health service in Wales is in a complete mess before the pandemic, and I know it is in Scotland as well, and our education system, let's be honest. So this sense of independence and dividing us is an attack on our foundational history, on where we've come from and who we are. We've talked about statues, we've talked about our history, we've talked about past wars. We fought those wars together as a British army, as we've already mentioned on here. You know, whether you were from Scotland, Northern Ireland, France, England, it doesn't matter where you were from. Let's be honest, the British Empire in its heyday did a lot of things that, of course, we can say were questionable, but we did a lot of good things. People must remember this. It weren't all bad. Why is it everything about the British Empire has to be bad? There were good things that we did. Look at the democracy. We're the mother of all democracies. And even that is under threat because of idiots and woke leftness and socialism that is trying to, you know, cause this division amongst us as a nation and as a union. And I think there's going to be a day of reckoning that people are going to have to wake up and realize, whether you live in Scotland, Northern Ireland, or you're in Wales, that we have to stand up as unionists, that together we're stronger. And I think, you know, that's going to be, for us certainly in Wales, I can speak of Wales, I'm no expert on Northern Ireland or Scotland, but certainly for Wales, The biggest issue we're facing politically right now that's dividing us up is over the whole issue of devolution and independence. That is our problem here in Wales. That's what we're fighting against. And that fight, I'm going to fight with all of my might and all of my strength to make sure that we do not sleepwalk towards independence, that we stay strong, we keep together in the union, because together we're stronger. Look, we can trade much better on a global scale, far more than we can do. What is Wales going to sell to people? Let's be honest, water. Now, come on, wake up, smell the roses. Unless you can turn that water into whiskey, you're not going to survive. Let's be honest. There's a £13.5 billion deficit. We can't afford that. What are we going to do? Raise everybody's taxes. Most people will leave Wales. We'll invest. No businesses want to invest in Wales. Our infrastructure is appalling. Some of our roads are appalling. Our public transport, our services. It's diabolical. So the pipe dream of independence, going back to the question, the pipe dream of independence is about division. Dividing us up, divide and conquer, as you know the phrase. But I believe that the way we fight against this is to make sure that Westminster understands they're not the problem to devolution. It's these nationalists and separatists, such as Plaid Cymru, the Scottish Nationalist Party, and many others within different devolved administrations that are fighting for their independence. And we've got to fight back and make sure they don't get their way.
Yeah. Alistair?
Yes, well said, Richard. I agree with what you're saying there. If the foundations be destroyed, I looked that up, Psalm 11, and it says that the Lord will, upon the wicked, he shall rain snares, fire, and brimstone. So that's what is going to happen to the unrighteous anyway. But as far as us today in our political situation, what we need to do is understand that the foundations are being deliberately destroyed, because if we don't have anything to stand upon, then we're going to collapse. And so the whole attack upon our history, upon our statues, for example, that's in order to make us feel that we have no solid moral foundations, that everything that happened in the past was somehow bad. Therefore, we have to feel unclean today. I mean, it's a deliberate psychological effort to make us feel as if the essence of our nation is corrupt, when in fact, as Richard was pointing out there, it's anything but. It's a great nation that's brought light to the world largely. Another thing, though, that here in Scotland, I mean, it really does go deep, because the Scottish separatists won't even accept that Britain is a nation. Like we at Scottish Unionists, we believe the United Kingdom is a nation. I coined the term nation of unions, just as much as a union of nations, a nation of unions, going right back in time. However, the Scottish nationalists won't even give us that. They won't even say that this is our nation. It's like the nation that I have loyalty to, they'll pretend does not even exist. Okay, they can continue to believe that if they want, but I believe that Britain is a nation, and upon that belief, I make my stand, as do the others. They won't even accept that Britishness is a thing. They'll say, oh, Scottishness is a thing, but Britishness is some made-up idea. Well, it's no more made up than Scottishness is a made-up idea, or any other sort of identity is made up. It is still a real thing if we want it to be a real thing. But they won't even give us that. They won't even say that our identity is a real thing. And they won't even give us a nation. So they're trying to just undermine all of that. They're trying to collapse the foundations of all of that before we've even begun. And if we were to accept their premises, then we would just have to give in, because there would be literally nothing to stand on. So we do have, at A Force for Good, we have a 4-point position statement. And the first statement is that the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland shall be maintained. And the second statement is that the United Kingdom is and shall remain primarily a unitary state and one nation. And upon those points, we then develop further out of that. So we have to know what the foundations are, and once we can accept that what the foundations are, then we can move forward from that and build upon them. So if somebody's trying to destroy the foundations, it's our job to build them up stronger again. So we've got a strong foothold upon which to stand and to move forward. And that's a lot of what we're about, is creating that sort of philosophy in order to shore up the unionist position here in Scotland. And we do that through our online publications and through our hard copy publications, and in any way that we can, just promoting the United Kingdom as a force for good, as it says in our name itself, which we chose deliberately because we wanted to promote the idea of the United Kingdom as a moral concept in itself. And that gives us a certain strength as well, to know that we're standing for a good thing as we move forward.
Yeah. And Gary, I mean, if the foundations be destroyed, what can we do? Question to you.
Well, you know, as you knew yourself, John, living in Northern Ireland, we've been hanging on by a thread. It feels that way anyway for a lifetime, as far as the union goes. Whatever, at a few months' time, we're going to be celebrating, if we can, if restrictions allows us, the 100th anniversary of the foundation of the state. But that's only a political state. You know, our unionism is a state of mind as well. And of course, Northern Ireland may have been created as a separate state in 1921, but you know, Ireland itself was part of the British Isles for centuries, and I am British, and the people around me are. But we're our Britishness is being eroded, our Britishness is being questioned, a bit like what Alistair was saying. You know, there's propaganda being used against, there's misinformation, and under the start used the revisionism, and like we have been besought and plagued with revisionism. I wonder that I even lived through the troubles whenever I hear how it's described now, because apparently the only people that anything wrong with ourselves. But the difficulty, I think, in this country here is that there are people who buy into that whole way of thinking, and too many people are buying into it. And now, if you, as I said in my last comment, patriotism now is seen as sectarian, it's now seen as racism, and it's been painted and painted badly, and it's been misrepresented to mean something that it's not, and that we should be ashamed of ourselves for being patriotic. Of course, as a country, I have very mixed loyalties, but I think looking at the Westminster and looking at Britain as a whole, there are people in each of our different nations, our family of nations, who are working against the union, and who are, you know, punching holes in that foundation and then trying their best to widen them holes at every opportunity they can get, which is a terrible thing, terrible problem. But I want to see the union maintained. I don't see a future in any of the nations separate to the United Kingdom and for Great Britain. And again, I refer back to Alistair one more time, what I said the last time, which is a very valid point, that, you know, this denial that Britishness is a thing, that it exists, that's something we hate to combat as well, because it does exist. It is a thing. And just as much as everything else is, the way nationality is, and it's a positive thing. The this past year has been, to me, a tsunami of criticism and shamefacedness getting level at. Is that a standing count there? Did I get a standing count by any chance? There's been a whole tsunami of criticism leveled against us in our history and our past, and, you know, again, I refer back to my previous point as well. We should be ashamed, supposedly, of everything in our past. But people who were shot while conducting acts of terrorism should be remembered and immortalised, and there's no problem with that. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of problems ahead, but I think the union should and can be maintained. I think, and I heard Sturgeon on the other day, shadow boxing around the idea of another referendum. I think she didn't really want a referendum. I think she knows what the answer will be, and she's pretty firm this argument. Oh yeah, but that referendum and at that time was before Brexit. I think it'll be different this time. I'm not so sure. I think Scotland will come through the union again, and so will Wales. I think there's enough.
Yeah. So just on a question, and look, I know that Richard has to leave very shortly, and I really thank him for giving us the time. And what a wonderful voice, a man from Wales that speaks like us people right around the United Kingdom, and he believes in exactly the same things that we do. But there's not only one person in Wales like that, there's a whole host of them, and Richard can bear testament to that. So Richard, just over to you, and I would just like you to, because I know that you've got to go. We normally hang on here till 9:30, and hoping everybody else on the screen can stay with us. So I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure each and every person here would, and the people that are watching. And Richard, now that you're our correspondent from Wales, we hope to see you regularly on the screen, telling us what is happening in Wales, telling us what it is that we need to help you with, that we need to stand together with, and and because united we stand, divided we definitely fall. And if we can help each other in our hour of need, well, that's how we will maintain the United Kingdom. So over to you, Richard, to close before you bail out.
Firstly, my reason for needing to go is my wife was rushed into hospital late last night with breathing difficulties, and which actually it'll tie into what I'm about to say actually. And it's a new hospital. Our health board here in Wales is in absolute crisis. 5 of the 7 health boards are in special measures under the Welsh government led by Welsh Labour. It's absolute disgrace. And my wife was rushed in. There was one doctor, one nurse on duty. This is a new hospital, by the way, so they're understaffed. I was in Cardiff yesterday. I had meetings all day down at the Senedd, down at the Assembly. I had a meeting with a number of politicians and other business people as well. And so when I got home, she phoned an ambulance. They were told there was no ambulance available for her. No ambulance. So they told her to get a taxi. Now, it's about 15 miles from my home to get to the hospital. So she had to get a taxi 15 miles down the road because there's no ambulance for her. So fair enough. Taxi came, took her in. She got sore. She went in last night about 10:30. She got sore at 6:30, 7:30, somewhere around that time this morning. So she was on a trolley. This is what's happening in Wales. This is the NHS. It's the state that it's in. So this is not something I'm making up. It happened to me last night. So I phoned my wife, and it was difficult to get hold of her because the signal was bad. I kept phoning her. I said, "Have you seen a doctor?" "No, I haven't seen anybody." So then they took her bloods. Then they x-rayed her lungs because she was showing signs of having COVID. So I said, well, are they going to test you for COVID? And she said, no, they've told me to go home and book a test. So she's in the hospital. And I'm like, well, why don't you test her in the hospital? What the blooming heck is wrong with you people? So they send her home. So I picked her up. She's in bed now, actually. That's why I've got to get the kids ready for school and stuff tomorrow. So I'm doing my daddy thing. And so now she's in bed, and we've booked the test, which is in a different area where I'm from, different constituency. It's in Merthyr Tydfil, in the heart of the valleys. So I've got to take her there tomorrow to get a test. We've now got to self-isolate for 10 to 14 days. Not knowing, my kids can't go to school, which I've got to phone school tomorrow. I'm planning to take them tomorrow, but now I don't know if I'm allowed to take them because my wife's got to have a test. Now, I say all that to say this. The NHS in Wales is an absolute disgrace. They were paying a senior advisor, I think it was about £10,000 a month, and he was living in Marbella in Spain. That's a fact check. That's not something I'm making up. It's a reality. I can go on. The health boards that have been in crisis, if you looked at what their wages of their CEOs were and what they were doing, it's absolutely diabolical. They were having a revolving door of CEOs all the time because they weren't really doing their job very well and being paid stupid amounts of money. And so what I'm more worried about for Wales in particular, and I can be a bit biased too and selfish for Wales here, is that we are seeing the denigration and the collapse of not just our history in the sense of what we've talked about already, but more importantly, the services that people rely on for everyday, life, just basic things. We have, in my constituency alone, 1 in 3 children go without basic needs. They can't afford shoes to to go to school. Now, you tell me how that is right in 2020 when kids can't afford to buy, or parents can't afford to buy shoes for their kids to go to school. I was born in the 70s, 1975 to be precise. And I know what poverty was like back then. I know what it was like. My dad was a hardworking man, my mother as well. We got involved in the wrong side of things. You know, when I was young, I was put into foster care. I know what it is to struggle. I lost my brother at 35 to heroin. We went through the criminal justice system. We went through the drug addiction. I went there. I did all that. Admittedly, I did. And I came through it, thank God. But the reality is what we're seeing now in this modern society that we've developed here in Wales and certainly across the United Kingdom is that people don't have any aspirations or dreams anymore of actually doing anything with their lives because there's nothing to dream for. And that has been driven by a bunch of politicians who are nothing more than jumped up village councillors who don't really care about the people that have elected them to stand for them, to fight for them, not just for to keep the union together, but to care about their families, to care about the family, the unit of mother and father and children, and everything that really matters, the values that make a family. You know, these things are important and crucial. I am getting to the point now where I've moved from the angry stage, where I'm now into the campaigning stage, and I will fight with every fibre of my being to make sure that I give these people a voice. People in our society that feel that there's no point getting involved in politics because they don't listen. Well, I'll tell you what, they will listen because I will make them listen. I will fight for them. And I think, you know, what we need to see more and more in Wales is a coming together of like-minded people. And we certainly see it with the party I'm with now, Balls Welsh Assembly Party, because we're fighting to get rid of this devolved administration in Wales, fighting to get rid of Mark Drakeford, the First Minister, who's £147,000 a year for 3 million people. Boris is on about 60,000 a year, plus expenses, of course. Well, for 60 million people, there's a disparity there. It's just disproportionate. I mean, it's just absurd. And the way that the Welsh government have handled this pandemic and everything else to do with our administration in Wales is an absolute disgrace. And that man needs to go. So, hey, listen, that's my plug. That's my bit over with, John. And I thank you to Alistair and Gary for putting up with my rants. I do tend to rant a lot as a Welshman. One of my mates said to me, he said, Rich, one of your skills is you're good at complaining. I said, what do you mean? He says, when you complain, though, you get results. So, so if I am ranting and I'm complaining, it does work. Ask my wife when I've gone to a restaurant and I've had a crap meal. I start complaining and I don't pay for it and I get it for free. So it works. Trust me, it really does work.
Richard, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And on behalf of each and every person that's watching this evening, again, we extend that thank you to you. And until next time, my friend. Till next time.
And thank you to all the viewers as well. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Make sure you tune into the next one as well. See you guys. Bye.
Good stuff. Okay.
Yeah. Bye.
So on to the next part of the show. And the next part of the show, there's now, I'm from Northern Ireland. We've got Alistair from Scotland. And we've got Gary, who is he's an Ulster Scot, and he's from Ballymoney in County Antrim. And there's something that's, I guess, that is a contention for each and every one of us. And not just ourselves. I will extend that to Wales. I'll extend that to England, for the people in England, the people in Wales. And that is that we do have contentions. Although that sometimes we have different contentions in different parts of the United Kingdom. I mean, for example, in Scotland, the SNP, I mean, they're their own brand of contention. And here in Northern Ireland, we have Sinn Féin. We have the Alliance Party. We have the conglomerate of woke nutjobs in the Alliance Party, with the Marxists and Sinn Féin IRA that we all know. And we know also, Alistair, in Scotland, you have a problem with republicanism also. And for the people in England, I mean, over the years, the bombs has went off in England from these same terrorists, because we can't really paint them as any other thing other than terrorists, because that's what they are. And the political party that represents them today, well, they're apologists for terrorists, having terrorists in that party, and that's the reality. So I'd like to move on to another area here, and just before I do it, I would like to pop a little picture on the screen just to show people some context. And then what I would like to do is I would like to move around the screen, and I would like to ask people their views, the people on the screen. And also I would say to the people that are watching, if you could leave a little comment and leave a comment about what it is that we're going to speak about, because we're going to speak about something which is unbelievable in the context of 2020. And before I go into putting this picture up and talking about what I'm going to speak about, I mean, who remembers there just really from COVID, from the lockdown, and from the rise of Black Lives Matter, how that statues were under attack, how that these far left people right throughout the United Kingdom, where they're targeting statues, they're targeting our history, they're targeting our heritage, and they're saying that history and heritage, it doesn't have a place in the United Kingdom. And they're saying that because that some people are caused offence by that history and by that heritage. So I would like just to pop this little picture on the screen. It'll set a bit of context, and I'll ask you the question. Here in 2020, if some people are offended by statues and they have to come down, well, let's just, without any further ado, I'd just like to pop this picture up. Just bear with me for 2 seconds. Okay, so here's the context. In a place called Castlewellan, which is in County Down in Northern Ireland. On Saturday, I went to a place. I went to Castlewellan to look at the local Sinn Féin office. On the Sinn Féin office, on the signage on the office, it has the names of 2 dead IRA terrorists. Now, the office, it's manned by a guy, he's an MP, a sitting MP, although that he doesn't take a seat, a guy called Chris Hazard, part of the Sinn Féin. And, just think about this for one moment. Where else in the Western world would an office which is funded by the establishment be permitted to put the name of 2 terrorists on their signage? And that's what's there in Chris Hazard's office. So on Saturday, whilst I was looking at that signage and the 2 dead IRA men being commemorated on the signage on an office that has been paid for by the British government, an office that is funded by the Westminster establishment, and yet those 2 dead terrorists that have killed people, that have murdered people, that have blew people up, and those people are being remembered on that signage. Now, just to extend for a moment, is that MPs' offices, an MP is meant to represent the entire community. And no matter what political brand that MP subscribes to, his office under equality legislation, it needs to be open and inviting to the entire community. And it needs not to be non-approachable or not approachable to anyone. So in the context of those statues, Black Lives Matter are demanding that they come down because some people had a history where they were involved in the slave trade, or they were linked to people that were involved in the slave trade. I ask the people on our screen and the people that is watching, ask yourself a question. Is it right that Sinn Féin IRA would commemorate 2 dead IRA men on their signage? Now, let me just really give you the context here. Not less than five miles away, there's a man called Sammy Heenan. And Sammy Heenan was orphaned by this organisation at the age of 11. And every time that Sammy Heenan thinks about those 2 dead IRA men being commemorated on an MP's signage and being glorified, every time he thinks about that, he's re-traumatised at what happened to him at the age of 11 when the IRA shot his father in the yard of his farm. And that young boy at the age of 11 had to go out and see his father dying at the hands of these people. Now, as I say, I find that inexcusable, unacceptable, and unbelievable. Now, whilst I was there on Saturday, I drove past this office to get a picture of the sign. And I drove on down a country road, and I come across this little granite stone that you see on your screen there. And that little granite stone is named after a man. It's Paul Magorian Park. Now, Paul Magorian was one of those IRA terrorists that is on the signage in Chris Hazard's office. And what I'm about to show here is that Paul Magorian Park is a children's play park. It's behind a school. It's behind a primary school. And it's named after this dead IRA terrorist. Now, just think of that for one moment, that these vile excuses for human beings, being Sinn Féin IRA, they are behind promoting this dead IRA terrorist on the name and on the signage of an office, and now on a play park. And they're painting this man Magorian, who actually was shot by the British Army, and he was shot because he had a rifle and he was out on an active service operation. And this man had murder in mind, and yet here's a children's play park which is named after him. Now it doesn't stop there, because it turns out that the local council, the Newry and Mourne Council, well, it's seemingly that they have paid for this play park to be named after and glorify this terrorist. And also the Irish language school, which this play park is behind, apparently that they have paid for some of this also through the funding that they would get. So I would just like to I'll go back onto the screen, I'll go back onto the people on the screen, and I would just like to rotate, and I'll ask you your opinion on exactly what's happening here. Alistair, I find this unbelievable, unacceptable, and I ask the question, where else in the Western world would this happen? I don't know.
I don't know if there's anywhere else in the Western world. It doesn't surprise me, of course, because the Republicans have got form on this sort of thing, and they're always remembering their dead, even though their dead are terrorists. What is particularly upsetting is that, as you pointed out, this MP's office is the office being named after him, or are the names on some sort of plaque? Or
it's on the main signage. They call it the Magorian, and I can't remember the other man's name, but the two dead Irish, they're calling it the Magorian and such centre, and it's on their signage. Right. Because Sinn Féin are abstentionists, and I've always believed that if you don't take up your seat, you should not be funded by Westminster. You should only get access to the funds if you attend Westminster. Now, they're not even attending Westminster, and they're still getting paid for this sort of stuff. So really, if we had a British government with any kind of backbone, which clearly we don't seem to have, they would simply cut the funding from these people and say, we're not going to fund your office if you're going to be remembering dead terrorists. I can't imagine, for example, the PLO setting up a branch in Jerusalem and being allowed to name their offices, after a dead PLO terrorist. But somehow in the United Kingdom, we take a much more lax attitude to that sort of behavior, and we actually fund our enemies, which the government shouldn't be doing, and it should never have done that. And that would be a good start, is simply defunding Sinn Féin. Don't defund the police, as they say, but defund Sinn Féin. That would be a start. That seems that it would be within the gift of the British government to do a very simple thing if it had a bit of backbone, and it was standing up for what's moral and right as far as we British are concerned. I'm sorry to hear about the park that appears to be funded, again, probably by British taxpayers' money. If it's the local council, Sinn Féin controlled council, I presume that's done that. But it's obviously it's wrong from our point of view completely and utterly. But I think the British government should make a start on defunding Sinn Féin, or restricting funds seriously. I mean, I understand if you're an MP, you have a technical right, as you said, to represent everybody, a duty rather to represent everybody in your constituency, not just your Sinn Féin supporters. And so that would be one way of legally defunding them, by saying you're not properly getting behind the spirit of this MP thing here at all, are you? We're not electing you to be a Sinn Féin centre for revolution. You're the local MP. And if you don't accept that, then we don't fund you.
that would be a start at least.
Yeah, everyone else, you see, they have to go through an equality impact assessment, and what they've got to do when they set up an MP's office is they've got to understand what impact is this going to have in the wider community. Is this going to make this office open and inviting to others, approachable to others? And obviously, I would like to see who done the equality impact assessment and what criteria did they apply whenever they were doing that. And it's breaking the law in so many ways. And yet, as I say, it doesn't seem to be that anybody with backbone, either in Westminster or, I'm calling upon our own DUP here, because they've recently taken up another case that we were speaking about. And I'm calling on our DUP to demand, and not to ask for, but to demand the defunding of this office until at least that sign would be taken down. Because what that is that's glorifying terrorism. And glorifying terrorism in Northern Ireland runs contrary to the Terrorism Act. And there's another, Section 75 of the Northern Ireland Act, that places a statutory obligation on public authorities to carry out their functions with due regard to the need to promote equality of opportunity and good relations in respect of religious belief, political opinion, gender, race, disability, age, marital status, etc., etc., etc. And again, it runs contrary to that, because, as I say, really what that's saying is that they have a statutory obligation to ensure that people can approach that office. And again, it's not happening. Gary, your thoughts on that? Again, I find this like unbelievable. By the way, it says on the screen here, John Brennan had just put it up that is now 2 play parks that the same council had funded. There was one called Raymond McCreesh Play Park, named after, this is a terrorist that still has victims alive today, as does those other terrorists, So, if we're going to go through the United Kingdom today and look at statues and say, well, these people were involved in the slave trade, decades, centuries ago, and they don't have a place in society, why is it acceptable for these people to be on these signs and on these play parks today in 2020? Over to you, Gary. Give us your thoughts.
Well, I think it's typical of the double-speaker Republicans, where they theoretically, as you say, they're theoretical Marxists, but that's all it is. A CNA Marxism and their cars and their posture and stormont. But it also buys into their Ireland of equals, where everybody would have a place. Well, everybody obviously hasn't got a place because they disenfranchised the unionist population of that area, because nobody in the right mind for this background, especially people like Sam Mahaney, who suffered at their hands, has ever going to darken the door of that place. So therefore, it's there's a wee bit of one-upmanship there and a glorification of their dead at the exclusion of others, and not fulfilling his obligations as an MP at all. Well, as Alistair rightly pointed out, he's not fulfilling his obligations as an MP by his abstentionism, for a start, and by refusing to go to Parliament to represent his people. But, the hypocrisy of the whole thing is where they're going to try and milk the system and take all the benefits with it for doing the job. And I think if you look, Ronan, that John Brennan is right. There's a Raymond McCreesh Park named after the hunger striker. But, there's other monuments. If you go to Crossmaglen, the town centre, there's actually a statue of an IRA gunman in the square. If you go to, I think it's Graveyard either Strabane or Londonderry, there's an INLA memorial put up without plan permission in defiance of the local council. They just built it and put it up, and it's still there. A Republican gunman, and people who relatives murdered by them just had to live with that and get past it. No, I think these are things that are not being addressed, and I kind of really understand that part of the one-upmanship and this arrogance that there seems to be within republicanism. That there's a rule for everybody else, but a different rule for themselves. That they can be offended at so much, and they can be annoyed at so much, but let not anybody be offended at what they do, and that we are wrong to be offended, and that victims are wrong to be offended. And they would say a lot, and they have said a lot lately this past week, of legacy, and they need to tackle legacy. And that, again, to me, is probably just posture and absolute nonsense, because they're not tackling legacy, and there's plenty of other legacy they don't want. They don't want brought up. They don't want looked at or raked over again.
Yeah. We're coming to a close, people. I would like to thank yous for coming on. And yous have been great. I don't want to say guests, but yous are great correspondents, because we've now got a correspondent in Scotland. We've now got a correspondent in Ballymoney. And I just hope this platform's open to yous for anytime. For yous to come on, for yous to and together, let's face it, we've done a good thing tonight. We brought in people from the different parts of the United Kingdom to give the views from Scotland, from Ballymoney, County Antrim, from myself, who just outside Belfast, and from Richard from Wales. And next time that we do it, we can bring some people from England. Already we have correspondents, and this is for the benefit of the people that's watching tonight. We have correspondents from Newcastle upon Tyne, from London, from Kent, and some more people from Wales, and some more people from Scotland, and plenty of people from Northern Ireland. So look, I would like again to thank each and every one that turned up tonight to watch. The numbers have been good. The numbers have been fairly consistent, and no doubt whenever we look across the different platforms, we'll note that people were watching in all different places. And that's what it's all about: coming together, to stand together, to fight meaningfully and proactively in order to ensure that the United Kingdom remains strong, in order to ensure that those destabilizers, well, they can't get a foothold, and they can't destabilize this place beyond what it is that we want to maintain for generations to come, for our children and for our children's children. The United Kingdom can remain strong, whether that be Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland and England. Together we are stronger, and together that's the way that we must remain. So just to close, I would like to give the two of you the opportunity to promote whatever it is that you hold so dear within your area. So Alistair, just tell people whatever it is you want to talk about, and whether it's you want to give out the name of your Force for Good, you want to tell whenever you're doing these live broadcasts, you just go for that, because the platform is about sharing and making each and every one of us strong. It's not just about this platform. It's about having everybody to follow everybody's platforms. And then Gary, whenever Alistair finishes, we're on to you, and you tell people about your books and the things that you do. And then what we'll do is we'll close with a little song. And I would just ask you, don't go anywhere, just remain on the screen. We'll close the screen and we'll say our goodbyes in the background, but with a really gem of a song that's going to mean so much to each and every one of us. And every time I hear this song, may I add, it's as well I'm putting the screen down, because the tears come to my eyes, and I get choked up when I hear this song. And this is a song that'll mean a lot to you, Alistair. It'll mean a lot to you, Gary. It'll mean a lot to the linkage that we have between here in Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. So over to you, Alistair.
Thanks, John, and thanks again for having us on. I think your platform and your idea here has got a lot of potential. I wish you the best of success with it, and please do count me in for one of your Scottish correspondents. I'd love to be able to help this pan-British unionism, which is what we need. When we were campaigning back in 2014 to keep the United Kingdom together, the Scottish separatists were very clever in giving the impression that if you weren't living in Scotland, then you shouldn't have a voice, and that your point of view didn't belong. And that was really wrong, because what they did not want the fight for the United Kingdom to become a real thing throughout all of the United Kingdom. They just wanted to keep it a small local Scottish issue where the Scots would argue against themselves. But as we said at the time, and as we continue to say, if you're British, you're involved, because this is about the struggle for the future of our United Kingdom. So if you believe in the United Kingdom, it doesn't matter where in the British Isles or indeed the world you live, you're involved in this struggle, because the world needs the United Kingdom. Because as we always say, we are together a force for good. Speaking specifically about my organization, A Force for Good, at the moment, we're doing a Saturday broadcast at 1 o'clock every Saturday. 2 Saturdays from now, on the 12th, we're actually doing a 10-hour union telethon, as we call it, because that's going to be part of our annual Yule Britannia Christmas crowdfunder, which we run every year for 28 days. over the Christmas and New Year period, our Yule Britannia Christmas crowdfunder. So we'll be doing a 10-hour union telethon. I'll be looking for people to interview on that, and we'll be aiming to run from 1 o'clock till 11 o'clock at night with interviews, with me speaking, with prizes, with competitions, and so on, hopefully raising a bit of cash for the fight for the Union in 2021, which is going to be a critical year here in Scotland. So that's our Union Telethon, which will be at 1 o'clock on Saturday, the 12th of December for 10 hours. Anybody who wants to follow us on any of our social media platforms, we're on them all. And the address is UK A Force for Good. That's UK A Force for Good. So we're at youtube.com/UK A Force for Good, Facebook, Instagram, and Parler. And we did have the world's biggest pro-union Twitter page until a couple of weeks before the American election, and Twitter must have thought we were, I don't know what they thought, but they suspended our account. And so 8 years of work went up in smoke. Thank you very much for that, Twitter. They suspended us for no reason whatsoever. And then they told us we were a fake account. Well, our Twitter account had 4 pictures of me on the front of it and had been running for 8 years. So in other words, it was just we got caught up in some computer algorithm, and we've appealed and appealed and appealed, but they don't answer their appeals. So we're not on Twitter, but we're suspended from that. But we're on everything else. So please follow us on that, and of course our website, aforceforgood.uk. So thanks very much, John. Over to you, Gary.
Thank you very much, Alistair, and it's been great hearing a fella, somebody that can understand what I'm saying, which is first class as well, of course. And I heard you saying Ayr was your local area, so that's great, because my family originally came to the North Ayrshire area. John, I'd like to thank you and all the people who listened tonight for the opportunity to come and say my piece about Ulster Scots, the link between the two countries, historical and current, which are very strong, and reinforces, I believe, the union, especially between our two nations, but also and the UK as a whole. The book I wrote, for another plug, is 18 Summers. That's the story of William Hanna, but it's equally the story of every young fella who left their home and hearth, their family, to go to a war that they didn't understand. It's very easy for us, I suppose, nowadays, with the benefit of TV, the benefit of newspapers, and the benefit of history and an education system where we learned so much about previous conflicts. These young people gave their lives. I want them remembered. I don't want them to be any unknown soldiers. Can I encourage you, if there is somebody in your family that you know a little about research. I'm not a researcher, but I have certainly found out more about William Hanna in the past 2 or 3 years than most people knew about him in the entire 18 years he was alive, because it's all out there. 18 Summers, Gary Blair, you can get it at amazon.co.uk. Just type in 18 Summers and up shall come. I've written a few other books. I'll tell them another night under the pseudonym Stephen Shannon. If you want to follow me on Facebook, Gary Blair Publications, you'll get a lot of some of the things that he published and some of my thoughts, and a brave bit of Ulster Scots for me. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, John and Alistair. Oh, could I just say, by the way, you were saying the numbers are good. I was going to say you should get the SNP to count them. They'll be even better.
Yeah, no, you're right. Very good, Gary. I like that one with the close. I'm sure Alistair appreciated that. Anyway, I would just like to thank the two of you. So, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And again, I would like to thank everybody on the screen. And look, I would ask everybody on the screen to, give our Facebook page a like. Also get, follow us on YouTube. at RestoreGBNI. And again, together we are strong. And this platform isn't just about, as I say, the people on the screen. This is about bringing the people of the United Kingdom together in order that we can stand together whenever we need, in order that we can let each other know what's happening outside of our respective goldfish bowls, in order that we can share our contentions, we can share our problems, and together we can understand that although that say the SNP in Scotland or Plaid Cymru in Wales or some of even the Labour Party or the Lib Dems in England, although that those people are attacking British patriots in a particular type of way, what you will find is that it's a concerted effort, and those people, they talk together, they team together, and what they do is they work together worldwide in order to derail our successes. So isn't it time that we work together in order to give them some of the same? We need to derail their successes. We need wins. We need goals. I always put it like a football match, that some of our supporters have left the terraces. Why? Because we're not scoring goals, and we need some goals in our favour. And one of those goals that I want, and I want so badly right now, is to have Chris Hazard's office defunded. Because why? Because this is winnable. This is totally winnable, because he's breaking all types of equality legislation, rules and regulations. And what we need to do is we need to put the Parliament, the British government, Boris Johnson's government, our own DUP and anybody else with a vested interest, we need to put them behind the 8 ball in order they do the job that we elect them to do. Because that's what we need. We need politicians that's going to fight meaningfully and proactively in order to maintain the United Kingdom. Together we are strong. And do you know something? Why are we losing? Why are we losing? Because we are the silent majority. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you again for coming on the screen. Many thanks, Alistair. Many thanks, Gary. And look, here's to a great friendship and to, as I say, a platform where we can all come and share, and, together we are strong. Thanks very much. So look, what I would like to do here is I'm going to play a little song. Now, I'm doing this the wrong way. I'm working on another method of doing this, which will make it a wee bit more streamlined. It'll take me a wee bit of time to get this up, but when I get it up, it'll be worth it. And as I say, don't go anywhere. We'll speak to you very, very shortly after the end of the broadcast. So bear with me.
Just across the Irish Sea stirs a heart of loyalty, raising honor and indignity, drives a will to keep us British free. Not alone are we on this journey, we're in a land just across the sea. It's a hand that reaches out in friendship, and a bond that's lasted centuries. Let the cry be no surrender. Let no one doubt our loyalty. Reaching out to the brave red hand of Ulster is the hand across the sea. Not alone, we on this journey, or in a land just across the sea. It's a hand that reaches out in friendship. Is the hand across the sea? Is the hand across the sea? Is the hand across the sea?